intros, and then we each have information we want to share. There's probably going to be a couple people that might trickle in. They all get the front seat. That's pretty fun. I love how nobody ever sits in the front seat. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like school, events. Also, I just want to recognize that this is a low back pain workshop, and often sitting sucks for that. So if you have to stand up, feel free. It's a safe place for that sort of stuff. You need to grab a foam roller, whatever. Just do what you need to do. And then, yeah, so we have, each are going to do a talk, and then we definitely are going to open up to question and answers. So everything goes for that. So please feel free if you need to start thinking of some. And if nobody has any questions, we're not letting people leave until at least one question is asked. So, I'm Andrea. So I Balance Motion, I'm the owner. Started it many, many years ago. Bim Richmond's 11 years old as of June. Bim Van just turned 5. So yeah, I've been a kinesiologist since 2008, I think, maybe 2007, I don't know. So for a while. And yeah, I don't want to steal the show too much, but I definitely started more in the injury rehab side, in a clinical setting, and then slowly bridged that over to athletes, and then started working with everyone in between. So that was kind of my journey of having a lot of fun on both ends of the spectrum, and then really, I feel like fine-tuning that to the general population of people that we kind of mostly work with now. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Hi, I'm Justin. I'm a certified athletic therapist. I met Andrea probably in 2007. She was training the Richmond Rabbits Swim Club, and I was working with Richmond Minor Hockey and Seafair Minor Hockey, doing the dryland training for them, and we ran into each other at, I think it was Gold's Gym in Richmond back then.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, so I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
So I also went to school for kinesiology, and then got into personal training and strength coaching. And then I decided to go to grad school for athletic therapy, which is different than physiotherapy, that's what Maria does. So we mainly work with sports and orthopedic injuries. So we're the guys that run on the field or on the ice or on the court when the players get hurt. So we're the ones that are putting them on the spine board if they have a neck injury, or if they break their leg, we're the ones that are putting them in the splint. We also do the treatment and rehab behind the scenes as well. So in clinic, we treat mostly like we would athletes in the training room for injuries that happen during the season or during practice.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
me.
My name is Maria. I bring in a bit of a vibe of things. I was a track and field athlete growing up, and then after graduating high school, I went into massage therapy. So I've been a massage therapist for over 12 years now. And then in the meantime, I completed my kinesiology degree and then pursued physiotherapy. So I bring a little bit of manual work and a bit of the mobility athletic side into things. To spice it up, I also specialize in pelvic health. So I deal with the pelvis and things that can be associated with it. So I think today will be interesting as to things that can come up with low back pain that can be attributed to the pelvic region. So we'll put it all together. And Andrea and I are recent acquaintances, so I hope to be working with you more in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And it is like cool, like our professions in general, like since the beginning for me, I've always collaborated with practitioners, and it's been helpful just to be working with clients and the practitioners to going through those processes, but then in turn having to see the practitioners myself for ongoing treatment. And I guess the workshop, when I was thinking of doing different workshop series for BIM, low back pain was at the top of mind because I actually went through a really bad back injury in 2016. I herniated, I actually herniated 2 discs. One was a full extrusion, which when you have a disc herniation, it will kind of, the center part will break through the wall and if it's an extrusion, it usually doesn't recess back in, it just goes somewhere in your body. But it's a lot of inflammation caused with it. And then there was another herniation. I had a lot of, I guess, warning signs leading up to it, and for me it was a combination of, I was working as a strength coach, and in that, as you know, most of you have been to either sessions at BIM or potentially had a personal training session. We're always lifting weights for people, especially if we have multiple people in a session, training sports teams, and something I'm really passionate about teaching our interns and my coaches and whatnot is like how you lift things, even when you're just picking up a weight or whatnot. But yeah, so doing that many hours, I used to coach a lot. And then at the time I was training for a kettlebell certification that you had to use like certain weights to be able to pass the certification, but there's also a lot of volume. And I was super stoked on barbell training at that time, so I didn't want to give up that. And then I had a lot of stress in my life because I was a business owner, and I don't know, just life is stressful. And anyways, everything came crashing, burning down in January, and I just had pain. I actually ended up going for a massage with the clinician that worked out of BIM Richmond at the time. He's wonderful, but the massage released kind of too many things that were actually holding on to some stability, and from that point on I was in excruciating pain. And so yeah, for a couple times a week I would see Justin, and kind of how I know Maria is she works at Reformative, and the clinic owner, one of the partners, Larissa, was my physio, and I would see them each once a week, and they definitely got me back into shape within 4 months. But the time it, kind of going through that process was, I don't know, it was one of those things that was, obviously it sucked, but over time it helped me appreciate kind of obviously all the things, and then working with people. And then I actually ended up finally hiring a strength coach because I didn't think I would get back into weightlifting, just, I was in excruciating pain. And I was able to get back into a full weightlifting routine, not necessarily to my previous weights before. I just kind of lost some of the passion to heavy strength train, but I still could strength train a decent amount. But yeah, so I went through all those different phases, and I think it just helped me kind of relate to people, and I have a soft spot for it. So I've been there, and I had a really successful recovery. So not to make this all about me, but I think it's important to share is, now I'm primarily a mountain athlete, big into trail running competitively, and then ski touring and rock climbing and all the things. I spend a lot of time on my feet in the mountains, and I also weightlift on average twice a week, and I don't have any pain. And I have the occasional kind of situation where JJ has to fix me, but most of it's proactive, and yeah, it's not very often. And since 2016, I think I've had an increase in pain, which I could still do everything. I could still run and do everything like twice. And so I want to share, I've brought together kind of my team to be able to like share with you what we consider best practices, not just in the research, but like what we've seen with ourselves in my case, what we see with our clients, and then what they see with their patients, and just like in the community. So that's like the goal of today, is to give you actual practical information, so that you can work with it. So we didn't talk about who wants to go first.
You can go first.
You want me to go first?
Maria,
You like to go first.
Okay, well, when it comes to low back pain, sometimes the cause or the source of it can be elsewhere. So I find through practice is that we want to take a look at the whole body. So really taking full assessment from head to toe, because sometimes it can be hidden elsewhere. So I'll give you an example. Spinal mobility comes a lot in my practice if an individual is not able to move in certain directions. And our spines are really meant to move both forwards and into a back position, into rotation, side to side. And so I find if that piece is often limited, then the force is going to be somewhere in the low back region. So if we have limitation in the middle back area, often it will be translated in the low back region with pressure changes in the spinal region. So that's something that I see fairly often. Other things that are not as common that you would not even think are related to low back is actually constipation. And because of the pressure that can be placed in the abdominal region. So sometimes if we address that piece, then it can actually help with the low back. And also the pain that people experience with low back pain and how long it's lasting, it puts the muscles into a guard mode. So we're not moving as we usually would. We would kind of be a little bit more in a contracted positions. The muscles are going to be a bit tighter as well. And then over time, that's just going to turn into more tension throughout that region. So this is where we want to be more proactive. So if something has had happened in the back, let's address it early before it manifests into something that's a lot more substantial that we need to take a lot longer to address. Because it's easy to bend down, tweak your back, and then it takes a lot longer for the recovery piece. So oftentimes it's almost like we have to be motivating to move along with the program rather than feel that you're stuck because of the pain. So it plays a really big role. Other things would be core stability. I'm sure as you've all trained for that, it plays a big role for pressure management in the spinal region, as well as stability through our thumb area too, and through our hip flexors. And oftentimes it's not just about having tighter hip flexors, rather than can we move them through their full range of motion? Are they strong through their lengthened position versus just being in a shortened position? Especially nowadays when we're sitting a lot more, then the muscles are a lot tighter in that area, and that can play a big role in terms of the mechanics where the pelvis and the spine is. So there's different factors that can play in. Any questions from me so far? So can I gauge where people are at and how they feel with this info?
Can we go back to the constipation
Yes.
question?
Yeah.
So in terms of the pressure,
Yes.
or is it pressure or the muscles spasming? Because you kind of talked about that right after.
Yes.
So, and like what, is that prolonged over time or and does sometimes back pain cause constipation? Like what's the whole relation? I've never
Yes.
heard this before. So
Yes.
I don't know.
I'm going to take out my pelvic model. So
Okay,
you can-
here we go. Oh man.
Okay.
We're talking about poop and we've got a pelvic model. We've only been.
Give me one of those.
It does play a role, and I'll show you why. So our pelvis over here.
Just.
Okay.
No, it doesn't.
No, okay.
It
Yeah,
shouldn't.
we'll name it later.
But you can see, so your pelvic bones are connected by a disc over here, so it's the pubic bone region area, and then we have the spine that connects to the tailbone or the sacrum area over here. So if we go into the actual pelvic region, what we have is the bladder sits the closest to the pubic bone. Then we have, either for a female, we have a uterus in the middle. Males don't have that, and then we have the rectum at the back. So if we're dealing with constipation, then if there's a bit of impact of the bowels in the back end, that creates pressure in the abdominal cavity, and that pressure can actually be placed on the spinal region that can contribute to back pain. If there's bloating, gas, like all of that pressure gotta go somewhere. This area is busy enough with the organs that are inside, so then that pressure can sometimes be shooting into the back region. Plus, if we're adding a bit of tightness through the hip flexors that are running through here as well, because that creates more like contraction, the body doesn't move through full range of motion, and then the back is going to compensate for that change. The body is very lazy. The body likes to take the path of least resistance. So if it finds, oh, I have some pressure for here, let me put you in a position where I feel more comfortable. It may not be advantageous for you, so therefore we want to address that. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. That's
Yes.
interesting. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions for me? Yes.
The nerves that are coming out of the bottom of the spine that go
Yeah.
into the legs, how do they play a role?
Great question.
Yeah.
With that, so as the nerves are traveling through the spine, we have a canal coming through here. It goes through the sacrum, and then they split in many different ways. It varies from person to person. Now, those nerves are innervating your pelvic floor muscles over here, and they're also traveling through the glutes. So if we have some tension either through the spine or through the glutes, that can create some compression. And then someone may experience either sharp shooting pains through down their legs or even up the spine. So it plays a really big role that we want to be sure that the muscles are moving appropriately so the nerves don't get stagnant, and they can because they're also mobile. So sometimes it can be attributed to that. And even pelvic floor dysfunction, so if someone is clenching all their time or they're just holding their breath a lot, then the muscles at the bottom of the pelvis are actually not moving very well, and that can also lead to compression of the nerves and contribute to low back pain. So sometimes they can go hand in hand. Either pelvic floors are contributing pain in the low back or vice versa as well. Good question.
And maybe just as we're on the topic of pressure, talking about the pelvic floor, maybe touch on how we are kind of like a dome in terms of the diaphragm, pelvic floor, if that might be helpful just to like understand.
Yes, for sure it would be. So especially when we talk about core, and when we say engage your core, well, what really the core is, it's like multiple structures. So we have the diaphragm sitting at the top, we have the pelvic floors are at the bottom, we have the abdominals at the front part, and then we have the spine and the musculature at the back area. So it's a canister, and everything has to work together in a balanced way for the system to work together, but then also if there is an imbalance somewhere, then it manifests somewhere, whether it is in the low back region, whether it's in the abdominal region, whether it's in the pelvic floors. So essentially how things are working, when you're taking a deep breath in, your diaphragm goes down, it flattens, that pressure needs to change. So your abdomen expands 360, so go from the front, the sides, and the back, and your pelvic floors are actually descending down. And when you breathe out, they come up. So technically the bottom part is like your second diaphragm or a trampoline, so everything works as a unit. So if we think about this as a canister, whether like a can of pop or even like a roll of like a cardboard roll, like a toilet paper roll. So if I apply pressure from the top and the bottom, it would hold. Like it's not gonna go anywhere. But if I have, let's say my roll is a little bit over this way, like we have a little bit more like a curved arch through our pelvis, then if I apply a pressure, that's gonna break. So that can manifest in different ways. So therefore we want to make sure we have good support through the core unit, not just around the abdomen, but also coming from the top, from the bottom, and from the side, so that you can have good support from all those systems. So that plays a role into spinal mobility.
And then also gives us the ability to weight transfer left to right, shift our load from our lower body to upper body, and even just be able to dissociate, so to be able to stabilize through our center and be able to move our limbs when we walk, when we do anything. And that's another thing that when we talk about core stability, when everyone's like, I want more core in my program, and then it's like everything they're doing is core work. It's like just kind of understanding what that means. It's more than just feeling your front abs engaged. Because when you really are strengthening your diaphragm, some of your deeper spinal stabilizers, your pelvic floor, you probably can't feel these muscles working, and it's confusing, I think, sometimes for people to really understand that efficiency is actually a sign of core training in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And having that awareness in your ability to coordinate with it on a conscious level, just even in practice, so you are aware what the system is doing, and then when you're doing your out and about activities, allow the system to do what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So then you will not be worried about if I trip and I catch myself, it's not going to catch my back, as an example, and 100% transferring it over to more dynamic and advanced skills is important.
When you move freely, you're not thinking about bracing your core and clenching and creating tension, and that's another thing where Maria was talking about some of the pressure dynamics and whatnot. And sometimes when we give people the most effective core exercises, we're not even cueing anything of engagement, we're causing the reaction. And that generally, in my experience, is a way better way of doing core training than sometimes, some people, I'm sure Maria, are able to cue people very carefully, but even still, it's, certain musculature, you don't know if you're engaging in unless you might have an ultrasound or whatnot, and it's very specific, but our goal is that the system just functions. And we have to figure out a way to do that. And the bodies are smart. but they're also good at creating their own way.
Yes, 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 they did, totally.
Okay, well, we'll probably come back to that.
That's really good. Yeah.
Do you want to try to top that without a pelvic floor model?
Oh my goodness. Well, I had something I was
Stuck in
gonna
hair,
talk
sorry.
about, but I actually want to build on that.
Yeah.
So as an athletic therapist, working in sports, I worked in pro football and college hockey before, so a lot of high impact sports. So we deal with a lot of what we term the malalignment method or malalignment theory. So for example, say you're an ice hockey player and you get slew-footed, you get tripped and you fall right on your bum. Or skiing or snowboarding, you fall right on your bum. You can actually end up with something we see commonly in the clinic called a sacral torsion. Do you think I can borrow that?
Absolutely.
Sharing is caring.
Absolutely.
So the sacrum is this triangular bone here between the back of the pelvis. So this is the underside of the bum. It's a flat triangular bone that turns into the tailbone at the bottom. With an impact, or with sitting in a certain way, don't mean to pick on you, but sitting kind of like on with your sacrum tucked under like that, right? For a while, you can actually give yourself what's called a sacral torsion. And it could be stuck in multiple different ways, to where one side of this flat triangular bone could be twisted in between the pelvic bones, or tucked under, or one side of the pelvis could be jammed up as well, or any combination of those things. And going back to the spinal nerves, and sitting like that can cause a lot of guard in the spasm of all the pelvic floor muscles, all the deep core muscles, and all the spinal muscles, and really compress the sacral plexus, all the nerves coming out to innervate the lower extremity. And everyone's anatomy is different. Some people can get away with sitting like that with no problem. I can't, and it depends on injury history as well. So that's something you kind of remind me of. Great.
And kind of with that, and hopefully I don't throw this off, but we're talking a lot about, we're not talking about necessarily getting rid of the tension, because other thing to remember that often your body creates tension or tightness because it needs to fix whatever is going on at the time. And so often, in my experience of a lot of treatment, is it's not necessarily about releasing everything. It's about figuring out kind of what's the root cause of it and finding a stability pathway for that. And that's where then the tension tends to dissipate and the movement becomes restored in many cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say?
I know, I knew I was
Do you have
going
any
to
more
do
questions?
In
I'm
terms
just so wrapped up in yours.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. You was really, and I guess I can kind of build off of that, and then I want to talk a little bit about treatment. And so, what happens in for us is like when we start to work with somebody, is we're not doing the same level of figuring out the torsion of the pelvis and whatnot. We're not diagnosing, and our assessments are a little bit more patterns based of figuring out where areas are restricted, and where we see instability happen, and it's just all done through assessing movement, range of motion, and we can test for some muscle imbalances via resistant testing, and then just getting people to move in the ranges of motion that they have, and then smoothing that out as much as we can. So one of the things in a rehabilitation or the start of this process is not worrying about what you can't do, focusing on what you can do. And in my profession, we don't actually treat pain. They do, but because we're not treating pain, my approach is generally even if you're going to be in pain, often reduction in pain is a byproduct, is let's get you as strong and as functional as possible. And not in a way that you can just do more, it's you can do more with less chance of having further compensation injury down the road. So our goal in how we're progressing the exercise program through core training, as well as hip stability and leg strengthening, is that's the goal for people. And so I think this would be a good segue, unless anyone had any questions, is like, what do you do when you're in pain right now? And I think that kind of starting there would be good. So maybe we'll bring it back to you, is when you have a client that has come in and, you know, it's classic where something happens and all of a sudden your back it gets thrown out or whatnot, various different causes. So first of all, no, there's underlying reasons why that happens. Sometimes we could have a car accident or something like a real direct cause, but more often than not, it's compounding factors that have built up, and then one thing was kind of like, I guess what they're saying, like the straw that broke the camel's back. I think it's kind of like that. Not really good saying, but yeah. So what do you do for that person that has come in and they throw their back out and they're in pain? Like, what does that look like? And then what's their kind of plan after that?
Usually, we want to calm that pain down. So that can look in many different ways. So it can look more like manual type of release. I'm more movement type of based therapist. Then I want to find patterns that are feeling comfortable for you to move the spine, and it can look in many different ways. So we want to incorporate that and actually use more like an active recovery to allow the back and the muscles to calm down. Sometimes it incorporates some stretching and flexibility and mobility for there. Sometimes we're activating other muscles all together. And then the piece of education comes into play as to why the muscles are guarding and letting you know the muscles are guarding, so then you can actually pay attention to them and be like, oh yes, I'm like holding myself in a tense position. I just need to let go. So usually those are the first steps that we take, and that often is very helpful to lower down the pain and then progressively incorporate more movement and then more strengthening. And so it's not, we don't always need to like stabilize the spine. The spine should be able to move. So we want to be able to strengthen it so it can do the different moves and activities that you're doing throughout the day. And then relating it back to what you're doing throughout the day. So then making it more easy for you to do. If you're constantly bending down, can we switch it up to by using your legs a little bit more to bend down to pick something up? So then we're switching up the pattern a little bit around that.
Yeah. Awesome. One of the things that we first do when people come in with low back pain is kind of to build off of that, is we're looking at their daily habits. So it could be the way they're sitting. We're just gonna keep thinking about it. But no, how are you carrying your posture throughout? And you know, when it comes to posture, it's not necessarily everyone has an ideal posture. It's your ability to get in and out of position. And so something Maria's talked about is your spine is meant to move. It's meant to flex. It's meant to extend, side bend, rotate. It's also meant to take, your discs are meant to take compression and shear. Obviously, excessive amounts of this, everything has a limit, but that's kind of how the body has been designed. But when you're in pain, weird things start to happen. And in my experience, the phenomenon that happens is that when people are in pain, it can be various different areas. But with the back, is they suddenly move in this weird way that directly causes more pain to their back. And for instance, like if you watch someone get up out of a chair with a back pain, they like side bend to the side that hurts, and then they get up and then they straighten their back. Like, it doesn't feel good on my back doing it right now, I'm not in pain. And so like literally the first thing is like, hey, how are you getting up from a chair? How are you bending over to like brush your teeth? What does that look like? So these daily habits that you have, that you've probably started doing weird things and not even noticing, we started addressing those because, you know, it doesn't matter about the time that you spend in like the treatment with your therapist or in the gym. It's, you know, the however many hours you're awake, it has a big component. And then even how you're sleeping. It's impossible, I think, to really set yourself up in a position to sleep because everyone knows. But, you know, when I was in a lot of pain, I definitely had a couple strategies of placing pillows in certain places. And I literally, when I would roll over, I would switch the pillow. And if I didn't do that, I would wake up in more pain. So I think that's another thing to really know, that the little things do add up. And they're really easy to disregard. What about you? What do you do when someone comes in with pain? I know you did.
You know what I do. As an athletic therapist, our approach is a little bit different. We do care about the pain and breaking that pain spasm cycle. But as an athletic therapist, typically we work with athletes, and our goal is to get them on the field or on the court as fast as we can whether it's in the middle of a game or partway through the season. So we mostly focus on function first, because structure dictates function. So for example, say an athlete, like a recreational athlete comes in, but they also work at a desk. And actually they don't work at the desk anymore, they work at home. And they don't work at a desk, they work on the sofa. So that kind of thing. So again, little things that you're doing here and there, and then you wonder why, oh, it really hurts my back when I stand up from sitting for too long, or if I try to deadlift in the gym, or do anything flexion related, because you're always in flexion. So we look at function and structure that way, and then I would see, again, what's moving, what's not moving, and the best way to get the person moving. I would say in the clinic, I do mostly hands-on manual therapy techniques, working on soft tissue, mobilizing joints, and then either activating or deactivating things that should or shouldn't be active to stabilize. But it depends on what stage the injury is at. Like if it's an acute disc herniation, it's absolutely pain management first and foremost. Make sure you can walk out of the clinic.
Yeah.
But if it's something that's a chronic postural thing, I'll get you a beer later. If it's a chronic postural thing, education on how to, sit on your sit bones rather than sitting on your sacrum, or ergonomics, for example. I think there was a question about desk height or something.
Yeah, it's on Instagram.
Maybe we'll get to that later. So things like that. So I mostly do the manual therapy, hands-on mobilization and exercise therapy that way.
Getting out of pain is important. As another thing to know is that when you're in pain, your body will react a certain way, and so we move weird when we're in pain. Your body's going to avoid certain things, and you have apprehension consciously, but as well as kind of in the joint and subconsciously. So even though you maybe want to flex your spine, there's a lot that's preventing you from doing that. If you have certain maybe something that's affecting flexion, like a disc. So it is one of those things that I think one of the take home is doing what you need to do, because I don't know how many people will tell me, oh yeah, I just have like regular low back pain, and you're like, what? No, that's not regular. Your back shouldn't hurt you. Like it's so that is something that I think, if you've had a bad back, quote unquote, for a while, people kind of accept that as this is my life. And I've worked with countless people that it doesn't have to be that way, but it does take some effort to not be in pain. And if you stop doing everything, you probably things will come back. And I definitely, if I don't keep up with my strength work, I start to feel certain things go, and then stability changes, and I don't feel as good. And so that's one of those things that I just won't do it. I won't go back there. So,
for sure. Think of pain as your body trying to communicate with you, right? It can come up either in a form of pain, or you have discomfort somewhere, or in any type of form. So use that as a cue, okay, something that I need to address rather than I should be fearful of. And then that's going to be very helpful for you to move a little bit more naturally rather than go into that guard mode, for sure.
Another thing that Maria talked about was leg strength, and I think that's something, so again, from an exercise standpoint, we definitely are looking at assessing the core strength and the function of, and that's a big component of any program, but especially a low back injury rehab program. The other thing that we're looking at is slowly building up general endurance, and so that's going to look very different for somebody who's been in a bout of pain for a long time. Keep in mind, if you've been sedentary because of pain, a lot of things have stopped working, and your general endurance, your postural muscles, all those things that carry you while you walk, and when you just like move busy out throughout the day, that's an important thing, that if you've had to immobilize yourself because you've been in so much pain, is you need to slowly get back to that, and you need to progressively challenge it in a way that you can achieve an adaptation without having a major flare-up. And mentally, it's important to know that. Working with pain scales is really challenging when you're in constant pain because it's hard to be like, I'm a 3 out of 10 versus I'm a 9 out of 10 versus I'm 11 out of 10. And I do, but at some point you kind of have to be like aware of, does this cause me pain during, after, or the next day? And then starting to build a relationship with that, because at some point you are going to have to start to push yourself, and you need to kind of figure out those boundaries. And at first we start really, really safe. But yeah, being able to start walking and moving, and it's not only like physical is important, but also like the mental health side of things. And I did have a psychologist here, but I couldn't find one that would come. They were supposed to come at the beginning. But in any event, is the pain, and I'm not an expert on this, but the pain cycle will impact your kind of depression and mental health, and that will affect your pain, and it becomes this perpetual kind of very doomy.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
vicious cycle, but it is a real thing. And just doing things like going for a walk, getting out in nature, being around people, it will distract you from the pain, and then it will also build endurance. So I think it's something that is a really essential component of a low back rehab program, and walking is usually the most tolerable thing to start to reintroduce, and then building yourself up to 30 minutes progressively. And knowing that you might have a bad day some days, and some days you might be feeling great, and you just kind of have to sometimes work with that and be prepared to adjust accordingly. And then the other thing is leg strength. So the reason we want stronger legs is because when you have stronger legs, you're gonna be less likely to use your back in anything from standing up, but to when you go pick something up, when you, I don't know, we do all sorts of weird things, but the stronger your legs are, the less likely you're gonna rely on your back. When you come into a gym setting, or maybe working with a therapist or physio, we'll teach you how to hinge in it and all those different things to be able to be more successful, like if you're gonna pick up your cat or what have you. But it is one of those things, it is like a life skill. And you don't have to know how to deadlift 300 pounds to be able to understand how to do the movement correctly. But even going upstairs, if you don't have good leg strength, you are going to start to use strength through your back. And it's just one of those things that I feel like can be overlooked, and we don't realize our legs aren't as strong until maybe you hit the gym and you get really sore after you do 4 squats, and they're like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And leg stability and balance too, especially as we age, we build up more stiffness through our joints. So that's often why that awareness in space reduces and balance actually becomes worse. And sometimes people don't even realize it because we don't spend too much time on one leg. And that's quite important for the supportive chain going up in towards our spine. And at no point don't you think that if you are at a certain age that you cannot achieve certain goals or improving your balance or movement in your spine or your whole body. Actually, yes, you can. And so we quite encourage that. And we're here to support you basically throughout the journey to go through the changes that the body has to undergo, because it's really easy if once we stop doing an activity, it's really easy for everything to go down at any age. And it only takes just 3 weeks for the mind, the nervous system, and the body to connect. 3 weeks alone for things to wake up, and then we start building up the strength. So it takes a long time, and we understand that. So that's why we start kind of slow, we're pacing it, and we're seeing where you are. And the journey is 100% up and down. It's never going up like this. You're gonna have challenges along the way, but at least you're not doing it alone, so you have a supportive system, and then things will come up. We fix one thing, one pattern, something new is gonna come up. So we just kind of go and build up the pieces together to deal with the back. And I think that's quite encouraging. It becomes motivating to do it in such a way instead of feeling like you're stuck. I had this back pain for years. And I agree, you don't have to be dealing with it for years to come.
The other thing I want to talk about in terms of maybe you can talk about a yo-yo client. In terms of they only come in and they're broken. Don't name use anything.
I might know someone. Yo-yo client, okay, so for example, someone who may have had an old back injury. They things feel great, fantastic. They've done all the work, they've done all the rehab and the strengthening and mobility work. Things are feeling good, so they fall off. They start doing other things, start trying new activities, and lo and behold, something pops up. They've re-aggravated their lower back pain, and they say, oh, I'm back, it's broken, let's fix this. You go through the motions again, you go through the 3, 4, 5 weeks of rehab and treatment. They get better, you don't see them again for 6 months until the next competitive season. So that's kind of yo-yo client, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great for business, it's fine, but I would rather not do that. I'd rather, and I'm sure the patient and the athlete would rather maybe come in once every 6 weeks or once every 8 weeks for a tune-up, for example. Like I know Michael comes in every once in a while. I just saw Luke a couple weeks ago.
I can make the tubes too.
Yes, of course. Just whether, before you're in acute pain, before you're in that stage where it's like, oh crap, I can't do anything about this. Before it's too far gone. That's really important. It's just like how you would maintain your car, for example. You wouldn't drive your car with a tire that's slightly deflated, because little trips here and there to the store are fine. You take it on the drive up to Whistler and back, you're going to bend the frame. Same thing with our bodies, right? So, and that could mean maybe your ankle's stuck or your knee is funny from skiing, and then that will definitely, as Maria said, translate up the chain and end up with pelvic and lower back dysfunction as well. So just being on top of things like that, so you don't become that yo-yo person.
And they still will see you when you're broken. Don't worry,
Yes.
I know this. But the point being is, I think not enough people do regular maintenance. I mean, as a gym, we definitely try to keep people, like a big part of it is accountability to keep people on consistent programs that are, we think interesting as well. But in terms of treatment with the practitioners, is a lot of people really wait until they're broken, and then they just get dug out of the hole enough to then, not do the exercises because, no offense, they're kind of boring, and then just kind of fall off. And sometimes, not everyone's doing a regular strength training program, but I think that's another thing of being a bit more proactive, is going to see a physio or an athletic therapist when you're for a tune-up, because you've been really active, you've been doing a lot, you just moved, or maybe you are moving this weekend or something like that, is I think another strategy that not enough people use. And I know it's expensive, but it's one of those things that, again, probably spending that money over the year spread out is a very different experience than having to see them every week or whatnot, and not missing out on fun and activities too.
I've never really thought of a physiotherapist as somebody to go to for tune-ups.
Yeah.
I only go for problems, because that was my impression.
Mm-hmm. It's a big culture, and I'm trying to change that and actually create this, like, we want to have the maintenance rather than we fix you and then you go off, because oftentimes people don't actually go for their full journeys and they're not reaching their full potential because they're feeling better. So then we're not actually fixing the problem till full potential. So I try to keep the expectations like right up front, at least in my practice, and I think more practitioners are going in towards that direction, and give you the tools that you need to do maintenance work to then keep your injury not at bay, but then reducing the risk of injury in the future. Or if something happens, let's say you do a new activity, then you'll be like, okay, I know what to do, rather than, oh my God, I'm just gonna fall into like poor patterns again and just like not move around or what have you, right? So then it's like setting up the foundation from the get-go, and then have you with the therapist through that journey till you're.
And then another thing, I know this because, like I said, I do the JJ for tune-ups. I know just go to him when I'm broken. Is then he'll like, oh, this is your regular pattern. Like he just knows it so well, and then he just goes, and then I walk out of there being like, yes, I feel great.
And things can kind of change seasonally too. I know we're heading into, we've got the Sun Run and BMO Marathon coming up. So people are running more. A lot of impact related stress on the joints like that. Also golf season. Golf is tough because everyone's rotating in the same direction a lot repetitively. So, working with qualified strength coach to help balance your program like that, to reduce repetitive strain in one direction, to balance the workout program is key as well.
And then in terms of the ongoing work, it's not just our business models that support this. It's actually just in terms of what makes sense, and in terms of also a progression model, because you're building, you're moving forward. We don't always want to start from the beginning, and from a strength component, we're progressing our clients' programs every 4 weeks with progressions along the way, or adjusting the programs to be able to facilitate that. And often it works really well, especially for injury rehab, that they're also seeing their practitioner and we're collaborating with them, and even or they're just kind of doing that work so then we can further progress them. And it's where we see the most success. And I also think that the little things, I don't know, since my back injury, I do a morning routine. Like, it's just like I foam roll, I do a couple like movement-based things, and then I do some stability movements, and I throw in things along the way depending on what core sport I'm really focused on. But that makes like a huge difference. I know when I travel and I take that out, I feel different. So I think that the effort of the few minutes in the morning, while my coffee, like my water's boiling, a couple hours, whether it's like 5 hours over the year to some tune-ups, and then whatever your strength routine looks like, most often like twice a week for 45 minutes is where we see the most success in terms of the actual the results for people, because it's the consistency that again lies that platform and foundation. And then that's, it kind of seems like a lot, but it's not when you think about it. If you've ever been in pain and how time consuming that is, it takes over your whole entire life, and it sucks.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing that I want to talk about before we move to Q&A is what you once had to avoid, you eventually have to relearn. And that's another thing. For years, I had a disc injury, so flexion was like I couldn't bend, and I avoided it. I remember seeing Larissa, and I had started running longer distances, and my hips weren't moving at all, and I was like, I think I need a hip replacement. Like, I was really convinced that that's how it felt. That she's like, you're just not flexing through your spine, and then she explained to me kind of what would eventually happen, and it would just continue to just not move. And so I had to relearn how to flex my spine. And I remember when we opened in Vancouver, I had to do 6 a.m. classes. I'm not a morning person, but I especially wasn't then, because I couldn't until like 9 o'clock, and I started work at 6, reach my toes, and so it was really hard. So when I would put on my shoes, I would lie in my bed and like put on my shoes, like, and this, I'm not even kidding, I'd have to do that. And then by the end of the day it was fine, but I just accepted. So I was in that was what my back would be like, because I had an injury. And then I just learned I wasn't flexing through my spine, did that, and now I can touch my toes. It doesn't matter the time of day, it's like any time.
Nice.
So, yes.
Fear can play a big role in that you become basically dissociated from that area that hurts you, and you're trying to avoid it at any cost. And so this is where we start that out early by letting you recognize where the pain is, okay, what movements are hurting, and then slowly like introducing them, so then the body becomes adaptable, like, okay, I'm feeling good here. But then also, working on, sometimes we'll pass that threshold a bit, sometimes it will hurt, but we're going to a level that we're not reaching like 10 out of 10 pain that's excruciating, but just a little bit, so you become more accustomed to it. And then with consistency, having different routines, that's very helpful to then eventually go into that flexed motion, if that's the limiting piece. Yeah, so it's like small steps that we're taking along the way to be able to, and you'll find that, sure, I can bend my spine. And then there'll be certain movements that you'll still be using that old pattern because you're still scared to do it, because you're like, what if that pain comes back? So and knowing that is good, because then you're like, okay, let me try it this way. So then you actually become you're exploring the different moves rather than feeling like you're stuck with just these particular movements, and then you become more adaptable and less scared to move.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the best way to go through that is to work with someone, again, like yourself or your coaches here, because in a gym, that's the most controllable setting you'll be in. You get to choose how much weight you use, how far you move it, and how fast you do it, and how many times you do it. Versus, for example, you have to react to something, right? Or you have to pick up your cat, or something like that. So I think working with a coach to teach you and relearn these movement patterns under control is key. Yeah.
Controlled to chaos. It's like we want it to be controlled, but eventually we want to be able to branch outside some of the maybe more regimented movement patterns, to be able to, I don't know, like jog if the light turns yellow when you're crossing the street, or somebody doesn't see you and they look like they're gonna hit you, and you just have to move out of the way because you live in Vancouver. But yeah, so that's I think the one last bit, just to kind of think about in terms of that. So we didn't get into like specific low back issues. Did anyone have any? Yeah, we're gonna open up the questions. You can either direct it to a person specifically, or we'll probably all like chime in. But yeah, Darren.
When is hot and cold on an injury good, and when is it not good?
So a lot of our research is coming up that cold is actually not that helpful when an injury is acute, because the cold is actually going to slow down the healing process, the natural healing process of the white blood cells and the histamine and the inflammation rushing into that area. So this is where we're moving more towards active recovery, so actually moving the joint is more beneficial. Heat is great to alleviate any muscle tension or soreness, and it just feels really nice on the body, so it actually helps to calm down the nervous system. Contrast is great when you're alternating between hot and cold, because that allows allow the circulation to flush the area from the inflammation. So then it comes down to, it depends on what we're doing, but if for an acute, let's say you just injured something, but the cold feels good for you, we're going with cold, just to help with the discomfort that you're experiencing. If it becomes like counterintuitive for the swelling, then that's when we'll slowly kind of move away from it and do more of like an active approach to help with the inflammation. Because sometimes inflammation can be a little pesky and just hang out in that area. So we may need to use some other modalities to have it, allow the body to absorb it a bit better.
I think just to add to that, I think what may be even better if you're unsure would be compression. That way you still allow blood flow to the area, say something is actually swollen. Like say you roll your ankle and you see it swelling up, it's like, oh crap, do I heat this or ice this? Compression would probably be the best. It would give you support, but also it would physically limit the amount of swelling that can occur in the joint, and also be giving it support, but still allow some blood flow and the histamine reaction and the healing to start. So that might be a better thing if you're not sure.
It's a good question. Anybody else have some questions?
So, these chairs or seats that are supposed to adjust the pelvis, are those any good for lower back pain? Have you seen any of those?
I have not seen those, but I'll be curious to try that out. My rule of thumb when it comes to sitting is actually changing your positions. So if you want to move around every at least 30 minutes or so, so even being in like a perfect posture for too long, it's also going to create tension. So just move around. So especially if you're working, if you have an adjustable desk, then move around with it. Be creative with it. Honestly, why not work in a bit of like a lunge position so you're getting a bit of a stretch? Maybe sitting down on the floor so you're actually getting a little bit more mobility through your hips, as an example. So, or just like walk around if that's an option. Let's say you're doing a meeting, can we just go for a walk and just do that instead? So changing positions, that would be, but maybe that chair, if it's, helps you to move around, kind of like the stability ball, then maybe that's an option.
or exercise balls.
Yeah.
Is that helpful if you're doing the
I don't know,
office?
because it gives you more back support. So I found like after a while, then you're kind of stuck holding yourself in position, and although you might be more active through your core, again, I think over time it will have diminishing returns. In my opinion, I've never really loved the all-day exercise ball thing. I think if you throw it in like throughout the day, just change it up, it's like a variety.
Yeah.
And then I think I don't know if this is true, but I learned like in a course so many years ago that it takes about 2 minutes for the spine to decompress. So a lot of times if you've been sitting for a long time, especially if you're like this, you're in a flex compressed state, and so doing something to lengthen that. So whether it's just standing, a lot of times lying on your back with like your feet elevated can decompress the spine as well, especially if you're in pain. That can be a really great position at the end of the day, or just like if you work from home and you can just do that. I mean, I don't know, I feel like anything goes in the office nowadays, so you can probably do that in the middle of the office. Things are weirder now.
Taking some deep breaths. Like we tend to just like hold everything up here rather than allowing the whole belly to expand. So that's another strategy to utilize.
360.
Yes.
Good question. Then we have no answers for it. Does anyone else want to ask a question we don't really have an answer for? We had a question actually on Instagram that was, what's the right height, or not the, what's the,
What's the right desk height?
yeah. What's the right desk height for someone in their respect?
I think that, again, moving around and changing surfaces or changing heights is best. I mean, ideally, ergonomists would say, you want to have your shoulders down, your elbows at 90 degrees, wrists flat, not too much extension, not too much flexion. If the desk is too high, you can end up shrugging like this. If your chair is too high, for example, like if your hips and your pelvis are not leveled, you can end up, dumping into the pelvis, creating that sacral torsion, or too far forward, things like that. But I wouldn't sit all day like I wouldn't stand all day. So moving around is probably the best. But ideally, having things ergonomically closer to you and just giving yourself the best chance to survive is good.
Yeah.
Making sure, a lot of people will, for example, they'll think working at a dining table in place of a desk is okay because they don't have a desk in their place. But physically, a dining table is actually higher than a normal desk because the food is then closer to your face. So ergonomically, it's a little bit different. So then they're on a laptop, so they're like this, rather than on a desktop computer.
That's why I have so much trouble eating on a computer desk. It's not close enough.
That's right.
That's why I have the opposite problem.
So things like that. I mean, ideally, yes, the screen, you want the center of the screen to be within 30 degrees of your gaze, and then shoulders down like this. But if you can't do that, moving around is best. Switching up every half an hour would be good.
And we talk about pelvic position, and so one of the things that we do with people often is just learn how to move your pelvis, and most people don't, like, they're stuck. And so that's another thing that you might be like, when I'm talking about this pelvic position, it's always in the same position, it doesn't move ever. That's another problem. Your pelvis should rotate as you walk, when you change positions, when you go into a sitting position. Yeah, and so that's something also to keep in mind, of that, back to that mobility. We need mobility through our pelvis, in through our hips and our spine to be able to facilitate. I remember when I was in back pain, going from a sit to standing position was the most painful thing of life, and then it would dissipate. And so I avoided sitting for a really long time. Like if I would go for dinner with friends, I would sit, go to a bar so I could stand until I could tolerate it. That was one way to still be social. But yeah, it was definitely a problem for a while. So I think trying to figure out kind of what you can tolerate, but learning how to sit is kind of it's a tolerance building thing sometimes for back pain management, where you might have to do it in really small amounts as well, and trying to experiment with it, because know that different positions and frequencies and duration and all that sort of things might not be not where you're at, it's what you're asking of it. And that's another thing just to keep in mind, that we can progress all of these things, just like we would a squat. So it might be sitting or walking or whatever. So yeah.
Motion is lotion.
Motion is lotion.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Is there like a lower back release that the three of you would recommend kind of on a daily basis
Ooh.
that you can give for yourself?
Get your friend to
that
walk
you
on your
don't
back.
need
That's a good one.
You don't need to have therapy.
Let's see. What is my okay? Let's.
I have one.
What's your go-to?
Okay, my go-to is to lie on my floor with my feet on the couch.
Demo.
So it's like this and like this. And then sometimes I'll do a breathing technique, but without getting fancy. But this is like what makes everything feel relaxed. And then when I was in pain, I used to also stretch my rotators, and often that would make me feel so much better. So.
Your pelvic floors are actually the most relaxed in that position.
Oh,
Yeah. Justin, you want me to go?
You know, yeah. Go ahead.
For me, it's a little bit more movement-based, cat-cows, and especially going through the full kind of rounding through individual, the spinal bones. That is my go-to for a little bit of movement, especially if I'm getting some back pain.
Very good. I think mine's more hip related. We can all try this right now. Just give me some. If you want to slide forward on your chairs, we'll go with the old seated 90-90 stretch. One leg over the other. Make sure your foot is off the edge so you're not putting your foot on your leg, okay? Keep your toes pointed up, and then just the weight of your arm on that hanging leg there. Sit up really tall on your spine, so maybe you might get a stretch already. And if you can, just push your chest forward a little bit. So that one you're gonna feel deep in the hip rotate, yeah. Sometimes from sitting a lot, that will give you a good release and really mobilize the pelvis and the sacrum that way.
We have a pretty mobile group here. Sometimes people like, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to see the other side, or else you're gonna be balanced.
You gotta be the other side.
Yeah, this. I guess I did this for lying down.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Some people, if they have trouble getting up and down from the floor, that's
Yeah.
an issue. Or if, for example, they're at work and it's not socially acceptable to lay on the floor.
This is a little more
This is
discreet.
the way to do it.
This is a little more discreet.
And then you can also go into a seated hamstring stretch like this too. Leg out, toe up again, stay nice and tall on the chest, and just push the chest forward, and you feel that right in your hamstring there, right up to your sit bone. Yeah.
And then the other thing is some breathing, breath work.
Yes.
Maria talked about it, but the nervous system can sometimes get a little fired up, but we need to recover to go into a parasympathetic state. And so, the nervous system is complex, so without even having to understand that, is just doing some deep breathing. And so the way I usually do it is in through your nose, out through your mouth, and try to make your exhale at least 3 times as long as your inhale. And then in your inhales, thinking of that 360 expansion. Most people breathe upwards into their chest, or sometimes people are kind of good about breathing out to their belly, but actually breathing into the back of your ribs so you can feel them open up. That's when things get really exciting and stuff happens. That's when I get excited when I start to get people. So even if it's just doing like 10 breaths, that can sometimes, paired with maybe one of these things, can go a long way.
Absolutely. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which taps into the parasympathetic system. And breathing is actually the only physical thing you can do to tap into your parasympathetic system, like, very quickly. So, yeah.
What about tight fascia?
So
Where does
question?
it come in? You've talked about all these assessments and exercises, but is that just a separate thing altogether that you have to look after,
No.
or?
It's a part of it. So fascia, hydration plays a really big role with it. If you're not drinking enough water and dehydrated, then your fascia is going to be a bit tighter. And so fascia really just surrounds the different muscles, ligaments, nerves, and so we want to mobilize it. So a lot of the exercises that we are doing helps to also mobilize the fascia as well. So then it becomes sufficient in terms of
And is that part of
exercises.
your evaluation or no, when you,
Good question. Usually with fascia, I could feel it more so if I'm doing any manual type of work, so then I can be able to feel, yes, the fascia is actually tight and we need to work on it, yeah.
And that does touch on a point of like, when you're in a healing phase, so if you are in an acute recovery phase, is what is your recovery looking like? You know, when you're sick, you kind of do all these things, you drink fluids, you buy vitamins and whatever. When you're recovering from a low back injury or any injury, you know, what you're eating, the amount of sleep, like it's exhausting being in pain. So you expect to be more tired and you need to support that. And then these, you know, kind of hydration, you know, nervous system. So maybe staying away from things that are gonna mess with your nervous system, like hard drugs and I'm just kidding. And like caffeine, alcohol, I mean hard drugs is your thing. I'm not here to judge you. But yeah, so making sure that you are addressing those things and also eating your broccoli. He's compensating for all the hard drugs by drinking extra water. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's multifactorial. It's not just do all the exercises. No, sometimes we just need to rest and allow things to calm down. So then this is why we always ask about those pieces, like the hydration, the diet, like your nervous system, stress, like how's life? Because that all plays a role into how your body is reacting and what it's doing. Because your body is just showing based off of what's happening on the inside.
I don't know if you've ever gone through something really stressful and you kind of like keep on going and then all of a sudden, bam, your back's run out and you're just like, oh, this is the last thing I have time for right now. But your body's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that is a thing of like how pain can manifest and again, not something that it's complex, but it is something to respect and just be like, all right. And the same thing can happen, you can sometimes just get sick or whatnot, but it's usually the little whispers that turn into a big scream and slap you on your back.
Yeah. So it's like listen to your body and what it's telling you, even if it's something like small that's nagging. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not doing it for no reason. So then addressing that earlier on can really help to mitigate like a big flare up that happens later.
Your normal back pain isn't normal. Yeah.
I don't have back pain at the moment, but I've got a different question. I'm swimming a lot, so I'm swimming competitively, and so I let other things go. So I don't do core work particularly, and so I'm just wondering, is there kind of easy ways I can get some core exercise, or is swimming giving me any, or is it taking it away? I don't know what I have to hold my body up, but I'm just not sure if I'm getting exercise or I should be focusing on that and doing other things.
Yeah, I can start. So the one thing of relying on your sport to as like a strength measure, it can be problematic because it's always training you in one pattern, and that might not necessarily facilitate the pattern, like all the patterns that you need. So I would say there's probably even doing like 3 exercises in the morning to be able, like a little routine, to be able to facilitate that.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, that's a choice. That's a choice. And if you're just saying I'm not going to do it, then yeah, swimming is better than not doing it. But in terms of when we're making decisions about how we want our body to function, yeah, I think that's the reality is, yeah, you have to do the things, in my opinion. But
and so yes, you are engaging your core when you're swimming in different patterns. And sure, if like you're not interested in, if you don't have the time to do specific core exercises, I agree it is a choice, but also learning how to connect to your core and knowing what muscles are working. So even that I think can be beneficial for you. So then you can, if needed, incorporate it. Let's say you're lifting something very heavy, right? You want to be sure you have a supportive system in here so you're not throwing off your back or something else for that matter. So knowing how to engage your core can be beneficial for you, and then maybe that's actually going to motivate you to do certain movements or exercises that involve your core with other activities that you're doing.
yeah, that's I think that's a great answer. And even so, maybe you had one session with Maria, learned and connected with it, so that when you went throughout your life, you could start to be, use your core when you pick up something out of the grocery store or while you're swimming or just through your daily practice. So you are getting core training throughout the movement. Yeah.
Yeah, so some functional.
Yeah.
That'd be useful, because I just don't have time for extra stuff that's not functional.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of other things to do, so the functional would be good. In other words, when I do something, engage the core.
Yeah.
That would be great, yeah.
And imagine the performance implications for that too. If everything's working properly as a system, competitively, you'll have that edge against the people that aren't doing it, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much for coming and engaging, and yeah, I think the like just taking some time to learn and understand is huge. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
I emailed you a million times, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach back that way. I can connect you with kind of different directions. I will send a follow-up email with a little bit of information and explain kind of, I'll give contacts for all the facilities and kind of what a program offer that way too. So you have that.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.